So you know they were toxic and you still care. Why is that? Well, if you have found yourself thinking, I know this relationship wasn't healthy, or I know that they hurt me, or I know that they lied and manipulated and ignored me and ignored my needs and crossed boundaries and made me feel really small, but I still care. Like, why is that? So, welcome back to the Be a Better You podcast. I am your host and subconscious reprogramming expert and emotional abuse recovery mentor, Allison K. Dagny. Today, we're going to talk about why caring doesn't mean that they were right for you and why caring doesn't mean you should go back. I want you to understand why caring doesn't mean that you're a weak person and why this feeling of caring about someone who did those kinds of things to you can actually continue well after you even have clarity and focus and all of that. And sometimes that feels wrong because our brain knows that we shouldn't have been treated that way. You know, cognitively, reasonably, realistically, we understand that people shouldn't hurt other people that way. And so it feels weird that, like, well, why do I still care? So after this episode, I want you to leave understanding why these kinds of feelings happen. And I want you to have some relief from that self-judgment that we often do. And then I want you to have a lot of insight into what you're actually attached to instead, and then give yourself that deeper understanding of your nervous system and what's going on inside your body. Okay, I want to introduce myself for those of you who don't know me or know my story, and maybe this is the first time that you're tuning in. I met my ex-husband when I was 19 years old, and I didn't know anything about narcissism. I didn't know anything about emotional abuse. I knew about what abuse was, and I knew what verbal abuse was, but I had no idea there was something called emotional abuse, and I didn't know any of the things that would be symptoms of that. I didn't know any of the things that abusers do that look like abuse or don't look like abuse. I just didn't know. I was very in the dark, and I spent 20 years with this person, had 3 kids with this person. I lived what most people would outwardly think was a very normal and happy life, but behind closed doors, it was very different. And when I finally realized that this was wrong, what was happening to me, it wasn't by my own information or studying. It was literally someone on the internet clued me in and told me this is narcissistic abuse, this is emotional abuse, and you need to get out. And I did. And it was very difficult, very challenging. You know, it was the worst time of my life. And after I was able to escape that relationship and get divorced and be on my own again, I realized that there's probably a lot of people who are going through the same thing. And that's why I wrote my memoir, When Tears Leave Scars. That you can get it on Amazon or anywhere, really. You just have to search for it online. And while I was writing my book, I was also going to therapy. And that was the thing that I thought was supposed to happen right after a divorce or going through something really traumatic like that. And I spent about 4.5 years with my therapist every week. And she was amazing, and she really helped me see a lot. And I talk about her in my book also. But the thing that wasn't happening for me was real change, because I would still get triggered, because I would still be ruminating, because I would still have these like old leftover stains from my abuse that were bleeding into my life and into other relationships and causing me to have panic attacks and spirals and all different kinds of things. So it would have it that I was searching for a podcast similar to the one that you're listening to right now. And I stumbled across a podcast that is no longer available, I don't think, anymore, but it was so helpful at the time because it was based on changing your thoughts and being aware of your thoughts and your brain and neuroscience and neuroplasticity, and I was just enthralled. And so I had reached out to this podcast host on social media and said, hey, I love your podcast. Would you mind if I embedded one of your episodes onto my website for people who are looking for this kind of support? And she said, sure. And then we started talking a little bit more, and she asked me if I had been interested in being a coach before, and I really hadn't thought of it. And I started thinking about it, and I thought, wow, this could be something that I could really help people with. And what happened was, during the course of me listening to her, and she had like 100 episodes, and I listened to every single one of them twice through. I took notes. I was listening to it just on my walks when I was cleaning, like all the time, and just absorbing everything that she was teaching. And I was putting a lot of these things into practice, and it started to feel different. It started to feel very, very different. And if you're a longtime listener of this podcast, you probably have been putting the tools and the strategies into place that I've been sharing. And the things that I'm sharing is based on that same methodology that I learned from this podcast host. I became a coach through her institute and learned the process that's called rapid reprogramming to change my brain. And then, because I got certified, I started a business and began coaching other women, which I've been doing for the last 5 years. So that's a little bit about me and why I'm here, and what my goals are for you is that you come here, you will listen, you will learn things that you maybe never knew, and then your perspective will change. I have guests on my podcast as well, and I love to bring on guests who have different who have different perspectives. I want them to share their ideas, their opinions, their perspectives, because some of you might align with them, some of you might not, and that's okay, right? Like if you don't like something that you're hearing, you can just turn it off and listen to something else. But the whole premise of this podcast is to help you change how you are feeling based on how you are thinking. So I want to go into this episode with a lot of compassion and a lot of understanding for what you're going through, because most people cognitively understand that a romantic partner, a spouse, a parent, even friends, coworkers, people in general, you may have cared about, maybe you still care about them, but you know deeply that they are toxic or maybe even abusive. And I'm going to help you with this so that you can start to disconnect these things, and that it doesn't create this sense of ruminating over the past and worrying about the future and constantly thinking about this person, so you can turn that mental noise off. Now, before we jump in, I just want to acknowledge those of you who are sitting here thinking like, well, I don't care about my ex anymore, or I don't care about that person anymore. And that is fine. Okay. I am in that same boat as well. I am completely indifferent to my ex. I don't have hatred. I don't have any sort of like anger or anything like that towards my ex anymore. Did I in the past? Absolutely. And I don't have care or love or, good feelings toward him either. I am just very neutral, just like if he were a stranger. And that's because I chose to move in that direction for my healing. I didn't want him to be taking up any negative or positive space in my mind. In fact, mostly it was negative space that was happening for me, because I was very angry about all of the things that he had done. And it was very easy for me to let go of the love and the care, like almost instantaneously, when I knew what was actually happening. But not everybody is in that space. And some of you really do have that like feeling of care for someone who hurt you. And that's what we're going to talk about. So a lot of women believe things like, if I still care about them, then I must not be healed. But that's not true, okay? You can still have care for somebody and still be moving forward to heal. Some people think, well, if I'm thinking about them, maybe, they weren't that bad, or maybe we are meant to be together, or maybe I should get a repair or try to reconcile. That's not true either, okay? We need to separate these things out of your brain. You may be thinking things like, if I still miss them, then maybe what I did was wrong. Maybe I made the wrong decision. Maybe I should have never left. Maybe I should go back, right? So the whole premise of this particular episode is for those people who are really still kind of feeling that like pull or attachment, that caring feeling. And again, I'm not saying you shouldn't care about people, but we need to distinguish between like reality and imagination here, right? And what's going on inside of your nervous system and your brain that's causing this to happen. Because When this happens, it leaves room for a lot of confusion. And when you have confusion and you don't have answers, there's a gap. And in that gap, your brain does not like it and it wants to fill in information. So what does it do? It starts thinking. It starts making up stories. It starts saying things like, oh, I wonder if they're thinking about me too. And oh, maybe I said the wrong thing. Like, so when we have a gap of information, we have to use that gap to our benefit instead of allowing it to harm us. So caring about someone can get misinterpreted because feelings, right? Your emotions and your feelings start looking like evidence to you, right? But feelings aren't evidence. Feelings are just feelings. So you can know that somebody was really unhealthy, that they are abusive or toxic, but you could still care about them, right? What if you have a parent or even a child who is really unhealthy or toxic, but maybe you still care about them? Maybe this is an ex or a longtime partner, something like that, a friend even, right? But you're like, oh, but I still care about them, okay? And that's okay. I'm not going to tell you shouldn't care about somebody. My role is never to tell you how to feel, what to do, give all this advice. What my role is as a coach and a mentor is to say to you, how do you want to feel? And then you say what that is. I want to feel at peace. I want to feel confident. I want to feel indifferent. I want to feel secure. I want to feel happy, whatever that is. And if you're not feeling that way, then we have to figure out why. And it always starts in the subconscious mind. Okay? So a lot of people have experienced this gap of information. They've experienced this cognitive dissonance. Like, why am I, really still caring for somebody who hurt me so much? In lots of ways, like I said before, in mostly relationships in life, right? If there's people involved, this is where it happens. But knowing that somebody isn't good for you or wasn't good for you doesn't erase attachment. All right? So let's distinguish caring, right, from maybe wanting them back. Because just because you care about somebody doesn't mean you want them in your life. Doesn't mean you want to be in a relationship with someone like this. So this distinction is really, really important. So the question you want to ask yourself is, have you ever cared about somebody that you would never date again? Or have you ever cared about somebody who you would never want to be in a friendship with again, right? And I'm sure you could go back and be like, yeah, I cared about that person, but I actually don't want them in my life. Okay, so this is where we start to shift because your brain is looking at this as evidence. Oh, well, okay, if I've done this before, then maybe this could be the case again, right? So it just needs a little bit of something to latch onto. So think about that. Has there ever been anyone in your life that you cared about that you'd be like, I would never want to date that person again, but I did care about them? Okay? So missing somebody, loving somebody, caring about them, feeling compassion for them, all these things, right? You can have those kinds of feelings inside of you, but still know that that person is not safe for you, or that person is not healthy for you, or maybe you're just not compatible with each other, right? Because that's a reality for people too. Some people are just not emotionally compatible. Okay, you might be compatible in a lot of other areas, but maybe emotional maturity is just very different. Maybe their trauma is bleeding onto you and your trauma is bleeding onto them, and these are just going to create lots of toxic dynamics, and this is where a lot of people get stuck. Okay, so if you're thinking things like, and I go back to this all the time, you're thinking these are the things that you would be thinking because the thoughts are creating the feelings, right? When reality is disagreeing with what you believe should be happening or should have happened, that sort of thing. Okay, so if you're thinking like, well, if I still care, then I should do something about it, right? A lot of people think this, like, oh, I feel this deep care for this person, so I need to reach out, I need to reconcile the relationship, I need to call them, text them, send them something, patch it up, right? The action piece usually is what happens after your emotions, right? So the first thing I talk about this on my many episodes, your thoughts are happening, The thoughts are creating feelings, right? Because if you're thinking things like, I still care about them, I still care about them, I still care about them, right? And that's what is happening in your brain. Then the feeling could be of longing, right? The feeling could be of like, I miss them, and because I care about them, right? Because the thoughts is I care about them. And you might be like, well, that's a reality. I do care about them. Again, I agree with you. However, it's also a belief, right? So we have to inspect, like, okay, what's the deeper thing here? A lot of times it's not just like I care about them. I would say to my clients who said that to me, why specifically do you care about them? What specifically about them makes you care so much? And we would dig through deeper and deeper and deeper, because they're layers like an onion, right? It's not just, well, I care about them, so I'm lonely and I'm longing for them. And then the action part, which I just mentioned, is what would you do, right? Well, if you feel longing for somebody, you might feel the urge to reach out to them, to reconnect with them, to have some sort of patch up or whatever, right? So the thoughts come first, they create the feelings based on what reality is doing, and then your actions follow. Okay, let me break this down in a very, very easy way, a very simple example. So if you, and most people can relate to this because most people hate public speaking. So if you are having to give a speech in public and your thought is, I cannot speak in public, because it immediately gives you like a visceral body anxiety, horrible feeling, right? So your belief is, I cannot do that. I cannot go do public speaking, right? That's the thought, okay? That's a belief. That's not even actually reality. It's just what you believe, okay? So we have to make sure we understand that facts versus beliefs are very different things, right? You believe you can't do it, but is that actually a fact, right? If somebody was going to give you $5 million to do it, I bet you could do it, right? I bet you wouldn't turn it down. You probably would do it, okay? So, or, if there was a negative consequence if you didn't do it, right? Like, I'm not going to propose that. But my point is, if you believe I can't do public speaking, I can't do it, what is your feeling going to be when you think about doing it? Your feeling is going to be like anxiety, fear, worry, doubt, all these things, right? So if you have anxiety, fear, worry, and doubt as your emotions, what do you think your behavior is going to be? The behavior is going to be, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to avoid it. I'm going to do everything I can not to do it. I'll try to find somebody else to do it in my place, whatever that would be, right? So it always starts with the thoughts, then it leads to the feelings, and then it goes to the actions, okay? So what you do, your behaviors in life are driven by your feelings, which are created by your beliefs. So if you want to change your behavior of anything, you have to work your way backwards and get to the source, which is your subconscious mind, okay? So when we're talking about, when we have this care, this longing, or these feelings about this other person, and then let's say we keep going back to them, or we keep reaching out, or we keep fawning, or being codependent, or whatever, those behaviors are happening because of what you believe. And if you don't check those things, your behaviors will continue over and over and over again. And most people just aren't aware, and that's why I'm here, because I want you to be aware. Now, I want you to just consider this, right? Because just because you care doesn't mean you should do something about it, okay? We have to also dig through the layers of what it is you specifically mean when you say you care. But also, sometimes just caring about someone is just proof that you're human, that you care. It's okay. Like, I can care in my heart for somebody across the world and wish that they didn't have to go through what they're going through, and just hold feelings of compassion without doing anything. I don't have to travel to a third world country and help somebody. Could I? Absolutely, right? But it just is proof I do have a caring part of who I am. Maybe in some ways I do a donation, or participate in some awareness campaign, or something like that. But you can just say that caring is just because I'm human. Just because I care doesn't mean I have to act on that, okay? Especially when it comes to somebody who hurt you. Now, here's where this gets interesting. I want you to understand what you're actually missing if you have this feeling of, well, I care about them, I care about this person and they hurt me. So there's something that you're missing here. And the things that you are not missing, let's talk about those first. You're not missing the criticism. You're not missing the abuse. You're not missing the way you felt confused, all the anxiety that you felt, your whole body just feeling like absolute exhausted. You're not missing walking eggshells. You're not missing all that crap, right? You don't miss it. You're glad you don't have it. What you're missing is connection, hope, maybe their potential. Maybe you're missing familiarity, fantasy, or a future that you imagined. And just so you know, episode 219, which came out a couple of weeks ago, is about loving someone's potential. It's called Loving Someone's Potential is Keeping You Trapped. So you may want to go back and listen to episode 219 after you listen to this one, if that's something that is like resonating with you. But you're missing these other things. You're not missing the bad stuff. You're missing the things that were good. And those good things were usually intermittent. They were usually given in small doses. They were usually not consistent. And that's why you want those things. And for most people, it's actually not about the person, because like if you put it on paper and you actually inspect this, you know that the bad was outweighing the good, right? Like if you've ever done that, like the pros versus the cons, it's like, oh my gosh, I can see very clearly this person was like really bad for me and all the negative things that you had gone through, right? But usually what we're really after is this, like we have to grieve the story or the fantasy or the hope that we were clinging to, right? Because when you think about being in a dynamic like this and somebody is mistreating you, abusing you, harming you, all of those things, right? But then sometimes they're really good and sometimes you're having fun and sometimes things are great. Well, your body is in a loop and it's trying to resolve the bad feelings by chasing the good ones. So what you end up doing is kind of locking in to all the good things and trying to not look as much at the bad. But reality is the bad is outweighing the good, right? We know this. So why does our brain want to keep pulling us back? Just be like, oh, well, I really care about them. And oh, well, they're, we had such a great time together. And, we really have a connection and we really love each other and we're meant to be. And we've been together for 20 years. Like I hear it all. I hear it all. Because you have a hope that things will change because you're still clinging to all that good stuff, right? So sometimes we might even tell ourselves, well, we really care about this person. I really care about them. I really, truly do love them. Like, I'm not saying you don't, and I'm not, I can't know what's in your heart, but I do know how the brain works, and I know how the nervous system works. And often what we are thinking is love and care is really just an addiction to the good stuff or the hope, right? Because if we let go of it, then we have to do some real serious grieving. And that grieving might be like, I can't believe I gave up 20 years of my life. I can't believe I let somebody do this to me. I can't believe that this was my life. This should not have been my life. So, with as much understanding and compassion that I have in my heart, I want you to know that you may love and care about this person, but I'm here to ask you to question it. Is it really that? Or is it something else? It's important. Okay, so I want you to understand something here, that your brain doesn't separate good from familiar, okay? And let me explain how this works. So your nervous system is designed to keep you safe, and it's also designed for familiarity. I talk about this in my book, Hack Your Mind, Heal Your Heart. So if you haven't gotten that, you can grab that on Amazon. But the nervous system really looks for things that are familiar, okay? It's not really attaching to happiness necessarily, or healthy relationships, or feeling emotionally fulfilled and steady and strong and support. It's not looking for those things, right? It's looking for what is familiar to you. And time again, I see this all the time. My clients come to me because of an emotionally abusive relationship, either that they're fresh out of or something that they're still in and trying to get out of. And the pattern is usually something related to a parental attachment from childhood. And I never really saw this in myself. Like when I was growing up, I thought I had a good childhood. I thought, I had two parents who were married. We had a normal middle class upbringing, like I just felt like I had a pretty good life. And I was able to connect the dots from the emotionally abusive relationship that I was in as an adult to my attachment wounds as a child from parents. And this is something that most people aren't like really privy to, like they're not really aware of, unless you've had like deep trauma from a parent, like it was abuse, or but if you had other things that were kind of softer, like let's say codependency, or a parent being emotionally enmeshed with you, or the parent was not around a lot or only gave you love and hugs when you were achieving, like different things like that. So there's so many different layers, right? And I don't want to like put it on one track, because everybody's got a different experience. But the familiarity that you experience in your adult relationships is usually a mirror for what you experienced as a kid. Because if a relationship is familiar, then your nervous system is like, oh, this is home. I know how to navigate this. I know what to do here. I know how to walk eggshells. I know how to keep the peace, right? So it's like, oh, I'm doing this because it's a pattern from my past and it's familiar, okay? And familiar doesn't necessarily mean it's good. It just means you know what to do, right? You know how to navigate it, to deal with it. Even if what you grew up with hurt you, even if it was chaos, even if it was, very unpredictable. Because here's the thing, research has shown that people are often drawn toward these familiar emotional experiences, even when they're unhealthy, right? So if somebody's always neglecting you and won't show up for you and ignores you, right? And you're like, why does this keep happening? Why do people keep leaving? Blah, 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 blah. Maybe trace it back. Look back at your childhood and see where this was a pattern for you. Was it a pattern with friends when you were little? Was it a pattern with your siblings? Was it a pattern with your parents or whoever raised you, right? And this is, just your nervous system. It's just choosing something familiar, right, over something unfamiliar, because it's scary. Like the unfamiliar is way scarier, because it's like, I don't know that. I don't know what peace feels like, and I don't know how to deal with that, right? And most people are like, that's silly. You would always want peace. Not necessarily, because familiarity is going to trump that. Okay, I want to explain about trauma bonds. I don't like the word trauma bonds. I say this all the time. I hate this phrase, because if you have a trauma, you're not bonded, right? Now, we can call them attachments, right? Because if you're attached to something, fine. But you're not bonded. Like, I think of a bond as like a mother-baby bonding moment, right? That sort of thing. So that's why I just it's just icky to me. I don't like that term, but people know the phrase. So we're going to call it trauma attachments here, but just so you understand, we're talking about what most people understand as a trauma bond. So these trauma attachments create confusion, okay? Because of that intermittent reinforcement, like I talked about before. It's that push-pull dynamic. It's that roller coaster up and down. It's these good moments sprinkled in with bad moments, or bad moments sprinkled in with good, right? There's this unpredictable affection. Maybe sometimes they're happy to see you, and then sometimes they're like in a mood and they don't want anything to do with you. And you're like, I don't know which person to expect today. Maybe you're experiencing inconsistent validation from them. Maybe sometimes they're like, wow, you did great. And then other times they're really super critical of you. So your brain starts becoming highly focused on getting relief. It is just craving it, okay? And this is what creates the attachment, okay? That quote unquote trauma bond. And really, for most people, the stronger that the highs and lows are, then the harder it can be to separate this feeling of I care about them or I love them from actually just being conditioned by them, okay? So a lot of women who've experienced emotional abuse, men too, think, well, if I can't stop caring about them, then it must be love, or it must be real, or there must be something there. But that's not necessarily true, because it can also just be a trauma attachment, okay? That's why I said before, like, we need to really inspect this. And that's why if you were working with me one-on-one, I would be digging down and asking you these deeper questions. Like, what is it? Like, let's go deeper and figure this out. So one thing most people have trouble with after emotional abuse is their identity, and they don't know who they are. And the reason I'm bringing this up in this podcast episode is because you need to inspect your identity when you are with the other person, because usually you took on some sort of identity that really isn't you, okay? And that's why people don't know who they are, because they have taken on personality traits, behaviors, like different things like that to survive, okay? So that's not really you. So when you get out of the emotionally abusive relationship and you're like, I don't know who I am, and people say this to me all the time, they're like, I don't know what I want to do in life. I built my life around this other person, and I really just don't know what to do or who I am. Well, let's look back. Like, let's trace this back to who were you in that relationship. Okay, you can go all the way back to childhood if you want. If you know that you had like a parent who was emotionally immature or emotionally abusive, right? Who were you in that relationship? Who were you in the relationship with the person that's in your mind right now? Whether it's an ex or, a friend or whatever. Who were you in that relationship? Did you try to fix things all the time? Were you the one that was always taking the action to create connection and, go out and do things? Maybe you were the rescuer. Maybe you were always trying to fix them. Maybe you were the person who just never gave up and the try hard. And maybe you just had unlimited amounts of hope and you're just like hoping for things to change. Okay? So trying to identify like what were your patterns in that relationship? Like, who were you showing up as? What does that identity look like? This is important because sometimes when the relationship is over, part of that identity is also either it can go one of two ways. Usually you'll take that with you into new relationships, or you will discard it completely. So it kind of depends on the person, but if you're like, oh, I'm still showing up as the fixer, even with other people in my life. Oh, I'm still the one that keeps hoping in every new relationship that I get in, right? So you need to check your patterns of your identity and who you showed up for, or how you showed up in those relationships, because it could be impacting your life now. But here's the thing, when we're tying this to like caring about this person, right? You're not just, if you're not with that person anymore and you still have this feeling of I care about them, I love them, you're not just grieving that person, right? Here's the kicker here. You're grieving a version of you that also existed around that person, especially if you feel like that they loved that person that was you. Like if you felt like they were nicer to you when you were the fixer. They were better to you when you were hopeful. They liked you better when you were trying hard. Like I can raise my hand right now because my ex-husband loved the version of me that did everything for him. If I wasn't doing everything for him, he was mad. He was upset. He would ignore me. He would give me the silent treatment, right? So then when I get out of the relationship, right, I'm like still showing up as this like try hard, overachiever, doing all the things. And I'm realizing that that's actually negatively impacting a lot of my other relationships. And now I have to say, oh no, I have to let go of this person. I have to let go of that version of myself. That doesn't mean I don't try hard. That doesn't mean I don't achieve, right? It just means I show up differently in my relationships. and I'm mindful of it, that I'm not doing it just to try to get the love and attention and affection like I did in my marriage that I was abused for 20 years. I hope this is all like turning on some lights for some of you listening. So the question that nobody asks, and this is important, is what does caring mean to me? Because if you keep saying, why do I still care? Why do I still have feelings for this person? And why do I still want the best for them? And why do I still love them, right? Like, we need to stop asking those questions, and you need to start asking, what does caring actually mean? Because the meaning you give it is the only thing that matters, okay? Because a lot of people think that caring means I should X, Y, Z. Oh, caring means I should stay. Caring means I should forgive them. Caring means I should try harder. Caring means that I haven't healed, whatever it is, right? So we need to challenge these thoughts, and you need to change the meaning. So what else could caring mean? Could caring mean that you don't do any of those things, right? And let me give you an example of this, right? I care deeply and love my children, right? I could rescue them all the time. I could fix all their problems. I could do everything for them. I could never have them lift a finger because I care so much about them. Is that going to help my kids? Is that going to help them be self-sufficient in life? Is that going to help them learn how to do new things? No, it is not. Okay, so the meaning that you assign is the key. Okay, so not why do I still care about them? Why do I still love them? What does caring actually mean to you? And is that actually true? That's the part that I want you to really zone in on. Okay? All right, now let's keep moving forward. Let's move towards healing. Like, what does healing actually look like? So healing is not just getting to some point in the future or some day when you're like, oh, I don't feel anything anymore. What healing is actually getting to a point where your caring is not controlling your decisions. So you can still remember them or have fond memories even. You can still think about them occasionally. Maybe it's their birthday and they pop into your mind or something like that. Maybe you even still wish that things had ended differently or happened differently or something like that, okay? But here's the thing. When you're really healing, your feelings will stop driving your life. Because, as I said before, your feelings are coming from your subconscious beliefs. So most people are like, oh, I just feel horrible and I just have these feelings in my body and my this and my that and I feel sick, and you're focused on your feelings. That's not a bad thing. We need to understand what our feelings are and we need to feel them, but we need to know what's coming prior. What's coming prior is all the things in your 95% of your subconscious mind. That's what's driving your life, right? So it's actually not the feelings that are driving your life, it's the subconscious, but we think that our feelings are driving our life. But your emotional charge will decrease, right? How I said before, I'm not in the hatred, I'm not in the love, I'm in like just an indifferent state about my ex, right? Your obsessions and ruminations and wanting to look them up and check on them and see how they're doing and what's going on in their life, like that stuff starts to just go away. Okay? It's not overnight. It takes practice, just like anything. Maybe your need for answers starts to go away. You start getting more into the acceptance of the reality instead of needing answers or trying to get closure, right? Just that need in general and the need for them, or feeling like that you need to close the gap between you and that other person somehow, some way, whatever that looks like, that goes away too. So thank you for being here. And just as a recap, I just want you to remind yourself that caring doesn't mean that they were right for you. It doesn't mean that you should go back. It doesn't mean you aren't healing if you still feel that way. And it doesn't erase the reality of what they did to you, okay? Your nervous system, the way that you had formed that attachment, and your identity and grieving a loss and what you're holding on to all plays a role. This is complex stuff, okay? But remember, the meaning that you assign is the most important thing. That is key. You can care about someone else and still choose yourself. So if you've been listening and you're exhausted from trying to understand why you still care, or filling in that gap in your mind, and you're thinking about it all the time, and you can't let go, and you can't feel indifferent, all this stuff, this is exactly the type of pattern that I help women untangle inside my coaching programs. And when we're together, we look beyond the surface level stuff. We get into the subconscious mind. We uncover your looping. We figure out these attachment patterns. We uncover your subconscious beliefs and all that emotional conditioning that's keeping you feeling stuck. And then rewire it, because your brain is neuroplastic and it can change. Okay, with new learning, your brain can change at any age. Science proves this. So this was the missing link for me, as I talked about early on the podcast about that other podcast host that I was listening to and the woman who trained me in the methodology that I now help other people use to get from this totally sad and depressed and anxious and exhausted state into a state of indifference, into a state of peace and happiness and a life of ease. So if you want support, you can go to my website and apply for a free call through the link in the show notes. I want to make sure you're the right fit, so that's why you have to apply. But if you fit, then we'll meet and we'll talk about where you're at right now, where you want to be, what are the patterns that are keeping you stuck, and what healing could look like moving forward. I really hope this episode has been helpful to you, and if you find value in it, please leave me a review wherever you listen, or share it with somebody that you know. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me in email or in the DMs on Facebook or Instagram. And thank you so much for being here and showing up for yourself, and I'll talk to you next week.